The observation deck of the Stellar Harmony hummed with the low vibration of the ship's engines as Lieutenant Mara Voss made her way through the corridor. She had been assigned to the diplomatic vessel for 3 months now, serving as the human liaison to the Vorkan delegation. The Vorkans were a species the Galactic Council had long classified as apex predators, towering, scaled beings with razor-sharp claws and teeth that could shear through reinforced steel. Most species gave them a wide berth. Mara had learned to see past the fangs. Today, however, her diplomatic duties had taken an unexpected turn. Ambassador Thelvan, the Vorkan representative, had requested her presence in the private quarters, not for negotiations, but for what he called a matter of cultural significance. When the door slid open, Mara found herself face to face with chaos. 2 juvenile Vorkans, barely the size of large dogs but already equipped with needle-sharp claws and territorial instincts, were locked in a tumbling battle in the center of the room. Their scales glinted under the artificial light, one cub a deep crimson, the other midnight blue. They hissed and snapped at each other, neither willing to yield an inch. "Rin, Kyle, cease this at once." Ambassador Thelvan's voice boomed across the chamber, but the cubs paid him no mind. Mara stepped inside cautiously, her boots silent on the polished floor. "Ambassador?" Thelvan turned to her, his golden eyes filled with something she'd never seen in a Vorkan before: exhaustion. "Lieutenant Voss, forgive the disorder. My offspring have been difficult since we left the homeworld. They fight constantly for dominance, for territory, for my attention. It is the Vorkan way, but on a ship this size." He gestured helplessly at the wrestling pair. The crimson cub, Rin, Mara assumed, managed to pin his sibling momentarily before Kale twisted free and lunged at his brother's tail. They crashed into a low table, sending data tablets scattering. Mara watched them for a moment, noting the way their movements, while aggressive, lacked true intent to harm. She'd seen similar behavior before, back on Earth. Her family had raised dogs, and she'd volunteered at animal shelters during her academy years. "May I?" she asked, glancing at Thelvan. The ambassador's scales rippled with uncertainty. "They are predators, Lieutenant. Even young, they could injure you severely. I cannot guarantee. I understand the risks," Mara said calmly. She moved forward, not toward the fighting cubs, but to a cushioned seating area near the viewport. Without a word, she sat down cross-legged on the floor, her back straight, her hands resting gently in her lap. Then she did nothing. The cubs continued their battle for another minute, crashing and tumbling across the room. But gradually, something changed. Rin paused mid-pounce, his nostrils flaring as he caught an unfamiliar scent. Kale's head swiveled toward Mara, his silver eyes narrowing with curiosity. Humans were rare in this sector. Neither cub had encountered one before. Mara remained perfectly still, her breathing slow and even. She didn't look directly at them, a lesson she'd learned long ago about predator psychology. Direct eye contact was a challenge. She kept her gaze soft, focused on the stars beyond the viewport. Rin took the first tentative step toward her. His claws clicked against the floor, his movements cautious. Kyle followed a moment later, competitive instinct overriding caution. They circled her at a distance, hissing softly at each other whenever one got too close. Thelvan started to move forward, but Mara raised one hand slightly, a gentle signal to wait. "It's all right," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to take anything from you." Rin inched closer, his scaled snout extending toward her outstretched hand. Mara didn't move to pet him, didn't reach out. She simply let him investigate, let him learn her scent, her stillness. His hot breath washed over her fingers, and then, almost surprising himself, he bumped his head against her palm. Kale immediately pushed forward, jealous of the attention, and nudged his brother aside with his shoulder. Mara slowly extended her other hand, allowing both cubs equal access. Their scales were warm and surprisingly smooth, like sun-heated stone. For a long moment, the three remained in that configuration, the human sitting calmly while 2 predator cubs vied for position near her hands. Then something remarkable happened. Rin, tiring of the competition, simply climbed into Mara's lap. He circled once, twice, then settled against her stomach with a rumbling sound that was almost a purr. Kyle's eyes widened, and then he refused to be left out. The blue-scaled cub scrambled into her lap from the other side, pushing against his brother until they'd both found space. Mara wrapped her arms around them gently, one hand on each small, powerful body. They weighed more than they looked, all muscle and density, but she held them steady. Their fighting had ceased entirely. Instead, they pressed against her warmth, their earlier aggression forgotten in the simple comfort of being held. Ambassador Thelvan stood frozen, his translator barely catching his whispered words. Impossible. They've never. Mara looked up at him and smiled. They weren't really fighting for dominance, Ambassador. They were fighting for connection, for reassurance. Sometimes the strongest creatures need to be reminded that they're safe. She stroked Rin's scaled head, and the cub's eyes slowly closed. Kale nuzzled deeper against her side, his breathing slowing to match hers. On Earth, we have a saying, Mara continued softly. The measure of strength isn't in the ability to dominate. It's in the wisdom to know when to be gentle. Thelvan approached slowly, lowering himself to the floor beside them. For the first time since boarding the ship, his offspring were calm, content, gathered not in competition but in peace. In the arms of a human, a species most of the galaxy considered soft, vulnerable, weak. Your species continues to surprise us, Lieutenant Voss, the ambassador said quietly. Mara chuckled, her fingers tracing the ridge of Kale's spine. We're full of surprises, Ambassador. We learned a long time ago that the fiercest creatures often just need someone to sit still long enough to let them come close. The stellar harmony continued its journey through the stars, carrying within it a lesson the Vorkans, and perhaps, the entire Galactic Council were only beginning to understand. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their weapons, or their cunning. It was their capacity to see the need beneath the armor, to offer comfort without dominance, to open their arms and let even predators become cubs again. And, in that moment, two young Vorkans learned what it meant to be held.